So, in our last lecture, we were discussing specifically the process of digestion, which is the process of breaking down these large macromolecules into smaller pieces that our body can use. And understanding that it's a series of chemical reactions that the end product of is breaking these bonds that hold these large macromolecules together and break them down into their simpler chemical units that the cells can then use for the various processes. So that brings us to the concept of metabolism. So, metabolism, again, we're going to be thinking about this in terms of biology. So, not necessarily how it's used colloquially. Um, so, when we're biologically discussing what metabolism is, we're talking about all the chemical reactions that are occurring in our body. And there are two broad spectrums of chemical reactions. The first one's being catabolic reactions. So these are things that are breaking down larger structures into smaller ones, so breaking those chemical bonds. And secondly, anabolic reactions. And these are reactions where we're creating new structures and bond building. So we're going from smaller units to larger units by creating chemical bonds. And both of these types of reactions require the assistance of helper molecules called enzymes. And that's what we're going to be sort of thinking about next, is understanding how enzymes assist in catabolic and anabolic reactions. So what is an enzyme? Enzymes are proteins that can help speed up chemical reactions. And again, chemical reactions are broadly categorized into two types of reactions. Catabolic, where we're breaking chemical bonds, and anabolic reactions, where bonds are created. So this first uh, diagram shows us an example of a catabolic reaction. So we see here the breakdown of some sort of carbohydrate. So we have an ingestion of a carbohydrate, and during digestion, um, these carbohydrates will bond to these active sites of an enzyme, and then that active site of the enzyme changes shape and starts to stress the bond between these carbohydrates, and then making it easier to break. That bond is then broken, and it's no longer a complex carbohydrate, but these simple sugars. And it was all assisted by this specific protein called an enzyme to create sort of, again, this catabolic reaction where we're taking a complex carbohydrate and breaking it down into these simple sugars that then can be used by cells. Now, enzymes can also assist in anabolic reactions. So, anabolic reactions, again, where we're creating bonds. So, for example, when we have these individual amino acids, they can again bind to these active sites of the protein enzyme, and that it allows for a bond to be formed between these substrates. And then essentially the enzyme is assisting in creating these bonds between the amino acids that are then being used to create this larger muscle protein. So enzymes are a chemical protein that is enabling reactions, either catabolic or anabolic, to speed up the reactions and either create more complex molecules or create more simplistic, simple sugars, either by destroying bonds um, between substrates or creating new bonds. So there are three kind of specific terms that we kind of went through when we went over those types of reactions. The first of that is, again, the enzyme, and that's the protein that speeds up the chemical reaction. The second is the substrate. So a substrate is the molecule to which an enzyme binds on and on which it acts. So in this case, our substrate is the carbohydrate. But then lastly, we have the active site, and that is where the substrate binds to the enzyme. So again, this is just the vocabulary that biologists use to explain the process of metabolism. So let's think about metabolism graphically and how an enzyme changes the types of reactions that are occurring in the body. So the process of speeding up the rate of a chemical reaction is called catalysis. So again, this is where an enzyme is assisting in a chemical reaction, which is shown here in the second graph. And what an enzyme does is it's lowering the activation energy. And that's the energy that's required for a chemical reaction to proceed. So in the case where we don't have an enzyme, we have this complex carbohydrate, and in order for that to be broken down, it requires this much energy in order to create those simple sugars that we were talking about previously. However, when we have an enzyme, it lowers that activation energy, and the chemical reaction is able to proceed at a faster rate because, again, this activation energy is lowered. Okay, so that sort of brings us through the idea of digestion and metabolism and how those two work together to create the different types of chemical reactions that are needed in the body. So where we're going to pick up next time is we're going to start discussing the other type of nutrients that are critical for our body to survive, and that is micronutrients. And we're going to see how those are involved in digestion and metabolism. Okay, see you soon.